Hello, fellow Degens. I am going to walk you through some steps on going from here, the download page, to getting your stuff in Unreal and rendering out something like this with your Degen. To do that, we are going to rebuild the materials in Unreal, prep the geo for Mixamo and Maya, create a skeletal mesh in Mixamo, create animation files in Mixamo, import all of that into Unreal, and then use sequencer to make and render a clip like this. All right, first step is to download your FBX file of your Degen. You can locate the download 3D file from the main Imma Degen website, connect your wallet, and click download. When you do that, you will just get this FBX file. It doesn't look like there's any textures associated with it, but it is all there. It's just embedded in this file, and they will be released once you bring it into a 3D package like Unreal. Unreal, I'm assuming everyone has a basic knowledge who's watching this of how Unreal works, but hopefully this will be simple enough that even if you don't, you can get going with these steps. So I usually make a folder of assets, and in there, the very specific ones, and I'm just right-clicking and saying new folder. And this is Degen 7487. Then we need to import him. So we go in there and we say import. Okay, so we find their FBX, and then we say open. You'll want to just keep all of this as default. So it doesn't really matter. We're just doing the materials at this point. Get a couple errors, but it is not that important. It will compile the shaders, but when you see ultimately these shaders do not have the textures associated with it yet. Now, if you go back to your folder where your FBX was, you'll actually see now a 7487.fbm. This is where all of the texture files will be, opened up as, and then you can bring these in. Some of these are not necessary. You just have to make your best guess, and it's usually pretty obvious. So if I were to double click on the skeletal mesh here, we have the geometry, but we have no textures. Let's import those textures into Unreal. I like to keep them with everything, so I'll create another folder in that same space and right click and say import. And now I can come here and select which ones. Now we definitely want the skin, the base color. This is the bucket hat color. This diffuse cube is not necessary. Iris blue, this is the eye texture. And then we have the pipe metallic pieces, and the pipe roughness. We'll want to grab all that. And with this guy, that's all that's necessary. All right, so now that we have those here, we can attach them. I'm going to walk you through the basics, and then I will speed through the rest. So now you have all the textures. So now we need to attach these to the material. So this is the material that's supposed to be the base color, the red. So if we double click on that, it opens up this editor, which is the material editor. And we can see that all that's attached to it is this parameter that's basically an RGB value, which is not what we want. We actually want the color from the texture. So you'll want to delete this parameter, just select it and hit delete. And then what we're going to need is a texture sample node. And then we're going to use that to bring in the base color. So over here, you can start typing in texture. Texture sample is what we want, which is right here. You can just click and drag. Now, because we have this highlighted, it actually grabs it. So if this were for the bucket hat, we could select this, and then in the shader values here, you can hit this arrow and it will bring that in. But we don't want that. We want the red skin. So highlight that and say use selected asset from content browser. From here, you can do the RGB or the RGBA. Usually, if it's just the color, and it doesn't have transparency in the name, I believe you can just use RGB. But if you get strange results, you can try RGBA. Now, you can also, if you want to get fancy, you can add some roughness and metallic values to some of this. The skin, is not obviously not metallic, but you can add roughness. For that, you need a constant. So if you right-click and type, this is another way to get these nodes. You can grab a constant, and you have this. And you can add this to roughness. And I think you'd want, so if it's not rough, it's going to be reflective. Set that value to 1. Let's go ahead and save it. You get the skin. And now you have to repeat that for everything that has a texture. And then there are some materials here that have no textures associated with it. So let's do one of those. Let's do the Ray-Ban shader. Again, this by default comes in with a parameter. This color choice is not what Ray-Ban frames would be. Technically, they're usually black. And then let's add a little roughness and metallic to give it a little bit more plastic feeling. To do that, let's grab a constant. And we'll need 2 of these, so you can do Control W to duplicate. Metallic and roughness. And, you can experiment with this stuff all day. But I'm going to just choose some values, just see how they look from here, and move on. And now we can look at our model and see that we now have black frames. The actual lenses need to be transparent. And the trick to that, if you double click on this, which is our transparent shader, which is for the glasses, the color is not necessarily important, although you can kind of make this a gray. I'm trying to remember what Ray-Bans look like. I'll keep it like that, but you need to be able to make it transparent. And that you have to unlock. If you see, opacity has no channel that you can add any values to. But if you select the shader itself, you come over here to blend mode, change that to translucent, opacity is made available. To give that a value, you can use just a constant again. And you'll see, I think 0 is completely transparent, which we don't want. Maybe something like 0.2, which will give a little bit transparency. Should work okay. So now we come here and So the process again for the hat and the eyes and the pipe are the same. We have textures for that. The gold chain, we don't. We have to make our own gold chain shader. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that. I'll speed that up. I'm not going to walk through or talk through all of that, but I will, visually show you. All right, so here we go. Okay, now we have all of the textures, and we made up some materials to fill the gaps with the necklace and transparency in the lenses. And so now I want to make sure we save our guy. And we are good for now. Obviously, everybody's Degen will have a different set of textures and shaders. You kind of have to figure it out as you go, but that's the basic way to reassign the textures in Unreal. Okay, on to the next part is prep the geo for Mixamo in Maya. Okay, here we are in Maya. Now, I know that most people don't have access to this software, but I believe there's already a demo / tutorial on how to prep your Degen for Mixamo in Blender. And there's also someone who showed a link to how to convert your FBX to an OBJ. But I thought I would offer an alternative. Essentially, if you import your FBX, you just need to strip the joints, the skeletal part of the FBX out, because Mixamo actually will put its own skeleton in. Unfortunately, you can't just delete the skeleton because there's some scales associated with it. So what I have done and been successful with is actually just selecting all of the top nodes of the geometry and duplicating it. You select it, Control D will duplicate, and then I will group, Control G, just so it's all one in one hierarchy, and name it appropriately. Now, if you noticed, there is a scale associated with this. And to be honest, I've had different success levels with scaling this back down to 1. For this particular degen, I found that I needed to basically freeze all of this transformations. You say modify, freeze transformation in the options box, confirm that scale is part of that, apply. You will get an error, which is here, which means that all of this geometry, that not the node above it, has been locked. And that's just a function of it being rigged to a skeleton or bound to a skeleton. So to solve that problem, select this actual geometry node, and you can unlock all of this. Right click, you highlight the channels, right click, and then you say unlock selected. For some reason, you have to do it twice. But there you go. So now when we select all of the pieces, we can say modify, freeze transformation, and it will go to 1. Hopefully this will give you the correct scale, bring it into Mixamo. Sometimes it get messed up in Unreal. Just be aware of it. You can always scale it depending on where you are at and what you need. We need to save this out for something that we bring into Mixamo. So with the top node selected, File, Export selected, confirm that you have FBX export, and say Export. Call it Degen Geo only, and save. You'll always get an error, but that's not to worry. Now with Mixamo, you have to create an account with Adobe, but it's free. Once you're in here, you can upload your character. It's really as simple as dragging it in there. You select Upload Character and drag it in. Let it process. And there he is without his textures, but it really doesn't matter for this purposes. Say Next, and then go through and best you can line up the pivots according to their suggestions. This is no exact science. If you get it terribly wrong, you'll know in the next section. And you can always redo this if needed. Once all that's done, you want the standard skeleton, and then say next. And then it will prep your geo. It'll actually add joints to it so that you can transfer animation to it. For any reason your pivots are off, you usually can tell with the weighting. That's how things are deforming, but this actually looks pretty clean. Something to note, oftentimes depending on what's in his mouth, you might not get very clean weighting. I know with my Degen 187, the rose in his mouth, part of the rose was being pulled by his shoulder. It can be fixed in Blender or Unreal. It's just an extra step. Hopefully you get something nice and clean here, and you say next. Yes, we want to proceed. So now we have him in Mixamo. Before you add any animation files to it, you want to download this. This is basically your rig, or what is called the skeletal mesh. In Unreal, the way animation is organized often in pipelines is you have a skeletal mesh, which has the geometry associated with it. And then you have animations, which are just skeletons that you can point your skeletal mesh to. So at this point, you want to download this. In T-pose is always good. It will by default name it the same name as you uploaded. So in this case, it's geo only. You'll need to rename this, but we'll do that in a second. Now let's add some animation. Let's go ahead and find some dances. See, YMCA. How does that look on them? All right, that cracks me up. So now you can go ahead and download this. And these will be your animation files. Now you could technically download this with skin and just drop it in Unreal. But if you choose without skin, it saves it in the format where it's just rotational value on joints, which then you can point to your skeletal mesh, which you just saved out. So we'll download this guy. And we can pick another. How about robot hip hop dance? Let's see how this guy is. So basically all you're doing is selecting it. You also have a chance to trim this stuff. You know, depending on what animation you choose, some of this arm space, overdrive will make it slower or faster. Dial it in for taste. All right, so we can download this, again, without skin. All right, so now we have downloaded the skeletal mesh and 2 animation files. Rename them. So the skeletal mesh, which is SK underscore and then the Degen name, naming convention traditionally in games and in other projects, you will have that SK, and then for the animation files, it's A underscore Degen 7487, and then the name of the move. Again, I have that here. Now, what's important to remember is that this, if you ever put it in or download another FBX to Mixamo, but you want to get your original one back. Like say if you did some animation for a different degen and now you want to get some more animation for your 7847, this is what you're going to want to upload. It's already prepped and everything will be consistent. You don't want to have to go through loading up the geo only because then you'll have to recreate the pivots. So as a shortcut, hold on to this. And if you want more animation for this one skeletal mesh, you just upload this again to Mixamo if it's not already there. All right, so now in Unreal, now technically we have these shaders. We don't need this skeletal mesh or this FBX that we brought in before. To keep things clean, we'll just delete these. All the shaders will remain there. And now when we bring in what we saved out from Mixamo, it actually will reconnect the shaders. So we'll go ahead and import into here the skeletal mesh first. You'll want to keep all this as default. Now, for some reason, in addition to the SK, you'll also get a physics asset and the skeleton. You want to keep that stuff. That's important. Now, I like to organize my animations close to my skeletal mesh, creating a separate folder. And now, again, right-click to import. And you can select both of these together. And now what you'll need to do is say which skeletal mesh these animations are associated with. Now, luckily, we only have one at this point, so you would select it and then choose Import All, or you would have to reselect the SK again. So now we have 2 animations, and we double-click on it, we can see our guy. Now, I'm going to tell you that I'm thinking the scale is a little wonky, but we can always fix that. And you can see the shaders are already attached properly because the names are all the same and it found it. All right, so now this is cool, but we can't really render this and show this off per se, unless we, stream it or capture it. What we want to do next is use sequencer to make and render a clip. So if we haven't already, make sure you save all. And let's go ahead in the original skeletal mesh. Let's bring him in here. Now I can tell he's tiny. Let's just scale him up a little bit. Let's make him 20. That was what the scale was in Maya. Again, you might need to dial all that into. In the world outliner, we have an SK Degen. Let's go ahead and save this as a level. So you say you would go save current, save as. It just ends up in the upper content. You can move this to levels or whatnot. So now we need to create an animation sequencer level. You can right click and under animation, you would say level sequence. And call it whatever you want. So if you double click on your level sequence, it opens up sequencer. Now we have our degen in the world outliner, but we don't have it in our sequence. So you can drag your SK in here. And as you see, there's an animation channel. Right now, there's no animation associated with it. If you just click on animation, it will show you all of the animations that can be attached to the skeletal mesh. So we choose the hip hop dance. We now have the animation associated with it. Now, I'm not going to go through and do a bunch of lighting stuff. That is a whole nother demo and tutorial. We can rotate him a little bit so he's a little better lit. Now, we have our dancing degen, but we don't have a camera to render it out of. So within sequencer, if you click on this button, create a new camera, it allows you to actually render this stuff out. Now, by default, sometimes it's out of focus. To fix that, if you select on the camera component, open up focus settings. Simplest way to fix this is if you click on the eyedropper, click on your degen, we get him in better focus. Play here, we like the framing, all that. Of course, you can animate the camera if you so desire, and you can also extend this clip. This particular animation lasts a lot longer than the default here, so you could actually extend this if you wanted to. We'll just leave it at there for now. The next step is to actually rendering this. So here, this little clapper button, if you say render this movie, you'll get this dialog box. Choose AVI sequence. Most of the stuff you'll want as default size. Let's use no compression, best quality, and then the path to where this is. It's often you'll get some motion blur issues in the first few frames. Usually like to say warm up, 10, 15 frames, and that will get rid of that problem. And then all you have to do is say capture movie. It'll ask you to save anything that's not saved. See the results. Drag it over here. Ta-da! Now you have an AVI of your degen with your animation from Mixamo. Don't know why we lost them there. Last few frames. Oh, I do know why. Because we extended it, you also have to extend the camera cut portion of it for it to actually render. All right, I think that is all of the pieces of what I was going to talk about. Hopefully that was clear. If not, definitely questions. I will try to answer as many as possible. All right, cool guys. Take care.